Coming up with a melody can be quite the challenge, especially if you're just getting started with music production. Then melodies and music theory, all that can be very overwhelming. So rather than trying too hard to come up with a melody, we want to build our way up to the melody, which I'm going to show you today. Let's dive in. So let's say you grab yourself a sample pack and you're messing around with the different loops that are contained within that pack, and you come up with a drum groove like this. Nice and organic, slight Afro vibe to it. And now you'd like to move on. You'd like to add a more emotional element to your track, preferably with a melody. But starting from scratch can be pretty overwhelming. So how do we reduce that feeling of overwhelm? How do we make the process of creating a melody easy? The first thing I like to do is create a soundscape, a rhythmic soundscape preferably, or something that just plays as a background to the existing drum groove. So therefore, I'm going to create a MIDI track, and I'm going to give this a slightly blue color so I know this is a melody track. Once you've created the MIDI track, you can then load up any synth of your liking, and it really doesn't matter which synth you use. To demonstrate the simplicity of it, I'm going to use Ableton Stock for now. So let's go into instruments. Let's type in pluck, and then I'll look for something that sounds interesting from the start. Yeah, this ocean pluck sounds kind of cool, which is a collision preset. Just gonna load it up in here, dial down the tape so we don't have that annoying noise in the background. So this is the sound that we have now. And right after the ocean pluck, I'm gonna load the echo plugin. Type in echo. This is an audio effect, so we'll have to search it under audio effects, delay loop, echo. And I highly recommend that you save your favorite audio or MIDI effects to these collections over here. Once you hit edit, you can then create these collections and just drag and drop your favorite effects into these panels so you can access them quicker. So what we're going to do, first of all, is dial down the dry wet to around 40%, increase the reverb a bit, also to around 40%, and dial up the feedback to about, I prefer 80-85%. So right now we have pretty long feedback. So once we hit a note, you can see it starts fading out slowly with a dotted eighth note rhythm. You can also change this to a different rhythm, like maybe just an eighth note. And a dotted eighth note is practically between an eighth note and a 16th note, which creates a bit more rhythmic variety to your sound. So pay attention to the difference between this and this. So again, dotted. It's like dum 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 rather than dum 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 dum, you know? All right, so let's leave it on dotted and let's crank it up to about 90% so we get a slightly longer feedback. And let's turn it to ping pong so we have a bit more stereo movement. Nice. So we'll create a MIDI clip now and we'll select a scale. I like this feature a lot about Ableton Live because it shows you which notes you can use in a particular melodic framework, which is a scale. So if you enable scale, you have C major by default. But how about we go for, I don't know, let's select A minor. So you see you get a bunch of these different scales. You can also select the Phrygian scale, Phrygian dominant, so you get more of an Arabic vibe, a bit more Middle Eastern. But we're going to select minor because minor is very well known to be a melancholic scale. So now I'm going to draw on a couple notes that are within this highlighted framework. And I'm going to turn on headphones so I can hear the notes that I'm drawing. And it really doesn't matter what you draw in. I just recommend creating a 16th pattern, so make sure you stick with the 16th grid here and draw in a couple notes that start at the tonic and move up the scale, and preferably also move down the scale. Our goal is not to create a melody out of nowhere. Our goal is to create a sequence of notes that fit within a scale so we can turn that into something rhythmical, a rhythmical soundscape, preferably using the delay that we have loaded up. So if we play that with the echo here, you see that part that's fading out? That's the part that we want. So let's dial this up a bit more. And you know what? I'm going to crank up the feedback to around 95%, increase the dry wet to around 50%. And what I'm going to do now is create a new audio track. In this audio track, I'm going to select resampling. That will be one way of doing it. Or I could also select track number 12, make sure that it's on post mixer, record arm the track that we want the audio to go into. And what we're going to do is simply hit record up here. Let it play through. Okay, that's about enough. I feel like we have enough. Let's disable the original layer now. So we've used notes from the A minor scale to create a rhythmic sequence here. And what we can do now is double click the audio track. So we open up this panel over here, and then we can highlight a specific section that we'd like to loop. And right now we are in the narrow grid. We don't want that. Let's go into 8th note grid. So usually I'd select either 2, 4, or sometimes also even 3 8th notes and hit Command L to loop this section up. Make sure to drag it to the very end so we have the entire loop. Nice. You see how that's already inspiring? And you can also drag this loop alongside the entire framework here. Nice, that's also cool. You can also drag this flagpole so the starting position changes. And let's try out 4. So this sounds rather even, but let's take 3 for now. I like the polyrhythmic vibe that we're getting from selecting 3 8th notes. And what's cool is that you can also start pitch shifting from here, so you can drift off from the original key that we've selected. So now we're not in A minor. Change the warp modes. Maybe pitch it up. That's kind of cool, but let's stick with A minor for now. Yeah. Nice, so we have our first little texture sound. To open up your perspectives a bit more, I'm gonna create a MIDI track underneath the Ocean Pluck layer. Now I'd like to load up a synth that I really like. I prefer using Omnisphere, so I'm gonna load up Omnisphere. Let's just type in Pluck over here. Yeah, I kind of like this sound, for example. Blissful Existence. I'll just take that. And I'm going to take the MIDI from the Ocean Pluck layer and put it down here. Double click, hit Command 8 to select all of them, and then pitch them up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we've pitched up every single note a perfect fifth. And this sounds like this. Already kind of dreamy, and it fits harmonically to our other layer. So what we're going to do is create a new audio track, and in this audio track we're going to hit resampling. So this would be the other way of doing it, but if we want to resample the audio, we're going to have to solo the track, or else all the audio from our session is going to be resampled into that layer. And since we just want this melody to be resampled, or this texture, we're going to solo our Omnisphere layer and record arm the audio track. Let's copy the echo from our Ocean Pluck layer, the first layer that we started off with, and paste it down here. What we're going to do now is hit record. Let it play through a bit. Okay, that should be enough. Now we're going to mute the original Omnisphere layer, dial down the volume on this track here, double click the audio track, right click, 8th note, and then highlight the section that we want to play. So I'm going to select 3 8th notes. Hit Command L, drag the loop to the very end, hit play. Now we have a rhythmic background texture that fits harmonically to the one that we've created previously. And now we can select our favorite spot. You know what, let's extend it by 1 more 8th note. Let's drag this along our entire framework here. So these quieter parts tend to sound a bit more mellow, a bit more softer because the delay starts fading out here. If you want a more intense sound, you can just drag it all the way to the left here. Yeah, you get also different tones. But I prefer the middle or right section. Yeah. Cool. I'm going to make sure that the Omnisphere layer and the Ocean Pluck are muted. You know what? Let's call these Plucks Original. So I just grouped them into a track that I'm going to mute for now. And we're going to call this Harmony layer, Omnisphere Harmony. And the layer beneath that, we're going to call it Ocean Pluck. We're going to group these together and call them Background Melodic Texture. So now we have a very static sound, right? It's a very static melodic background harmony. Let's playing that same loop over and over. How can we make this more interesting? We can make it more interesting by adding effects. And the first effect you're going to have to add is a filter, because with filters, you get to control the energy of a sound, specifically the higher frequencies of a sound, because higher frequencies, they do contain a lot of energy. And if you want to have an ebb and flow of energy, I highly recommend you use any filter plugin. I just prefer auto filter because it has a simpler interface. So I loaded up an auto filter on the harmony layer first, and you're just going to have to click the frequency knob over here and enable automation mode. You can do that by hitting this little guy up here or by hitting A on your keyboard. And if that doesn't work, then you're going to have to turn on the piano mode, so your keyboard becomes a shortcut keyboard. Just dial it up like this and dial it back down to the very end, so we get a flow of energy, right? An ebb and flow. Let's see how this sounds by itself. Nice, but we can intensify it a bit more by going really low. Yeah, it starts really low and then goes all the way up and then goes back down to the same value. Dial it back down to 591 approximately. Yeah, that's good. And right after the filter, let's say you want some delays. So you still want a bit of delay action going on when the sound is filtered down, and you can add another echo for that. So let's go into delay reverb, add in an echo, crank up that feedback to 85, dial down the dry wet, perhaps just a bit more reverb. See, also, it sounds a bit different. A bit more dreamy because we've added extra reverb, extra delay. And when the sound is filtered out, it still starts fading out. So we have a bit more subtle movement. But for me, it's a bit too much feedback, so I'm going to dial it down to around 70%. Copy the echo and the auto filter, so both of these, to the ocean pluck layer, so the layer that's playing the A minor, the root. Paste it here. Click the frequency. So just to illustrate to you, I'm going to open up the auto filter on the harmony layer. You see, so we have the automation in a new lane. And now we want the opposite movement. So whenever the harmony opens up, we want the ocean pluck layer to close off. And whenever the ocean pluck layer opens up, we want the harmony to close off. So we have that equal exchange of energy. And therefore, we're going to dial this up, dial it back down, and dial it back up. And notice how both of these sounds interplay with each other now, harmonically and in terms of the higher frequencies. It's just heaven. Nice. That is so freaking dreamy. That is so lovely. And now I feel inspired. Now I have a drum groove and something melodic to spark the emotion, which sounds like this. Can slightly mix it out a bit using the group. And you can dial in how much of the harmony you want and how much of the tonic you want, the root note, the A. And that just, it gets the feels going. And just as a bonus tip, I'm going to load up one of my favorite synths called Repro, and I've put it into my synths collection up here, Repro 5. I'm going to record arm this layer. And remember, we're in the scale of A minor. That's the scale that we've determined straight from the start. Remember this guy, this MIDI over here? That's the scale that we chose. We want to make sure to stay within that scale, that melodic framework. It makes it a bit easier for us to understand which notes we can use. So I'm going to double click to create a MIDI clip, and let's see if we can select a sound from the stock library from the synth here. Perfect. I like this one. It's a really simple saw sound, but we can take it. But how about we copy the echo from our existing layers, from the ocean pluck layer, and put it down here. And then I can start jamming. And I'm playing just the notes that are within A minor. So that makes it a bit more easier to get started. And if I'd like to decide which notes I get to draw in, I can just double click this layer, make sure that A minor is the scale, and draw in a few notes. Hit headphones. Nice. And from this point on, I just scroll through a couple presets that I like. And they can be really subtle sounds. Copy this over. Oh, that's nice. And once I have a sound that I like, I duplicate the layer and try to create phrases. I'm going to go into 1-bar mode, drag this guy over here, perhaps drag this guy over here. So we create AB, like an AB phrase. And for the second layer, we can now double click and shift these notes slightly. And we're going to still take the scale as our guideline. See, so we can't really do anything wrong if we just take the scale. Nice, kind of like this preset. And then you can just mess around with notes that you like and just pay attention to which one feels right to you. Yeah, if we ended on the A here, sounds kind of cool. So I'm going to take this, copy it over, and let's see how the call and response between both of these melodies sounds. And how about we move this guy up here? Yeah. Nice. All right, so let's group these guys up, add an echo on top so they start to merge into each other. Same settings for reverb 40%, dry wet 40%, and crank up the feedback. And you can simplify it even more. Maybe you just need a single note. That's it. Or like this. Let's see. Yeah. Simplicity is key. You don't need a complex melody. Keep it simple. I really pay attention to how the notes feel. How does it feel if we jump from one note to the other? Maybe it sounds too much, so we might take away some notes. Simplicity is key. Remember that. And if we'd like, we can just take our framework here, duplicate it a couple times since we have enough elements to arrange the track. And from the intro, we can take away the elements that determine a lot of the character. So let's take away this guy over here and introduce it later on. So we basically also created and added building blocks to the arrangement this way. And then at a later point, we get the melodies. Nice. Thanks so much for watching this video. If you learned something new, then feel free to hit that like and subscribe button. It does help the channel grow. Also, you can grab all of these sounds on Lotus Tunes and this specific project file on my Patreon. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.